The regularly scheduled meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for July the 2nd is in order. I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Good to see a crowd here tonight. I think I know why you're here. Good to see you. I'd like to see this kind of a turnout at every council meeting. As you regular attendees know, I make it a practice before a moment of silence to call attention to any of our residents who might have departed since the last council meeting. And since our last council meeting, the Grim Reaper has been working overtime in our town. I would remind you that we lost Betsy O'Connell and Nestor Tabo Ando, I believe that's the way you pronounce it. We also lost Archibald. Does anybody out there remember Archie? Also, he was a patrol officer in town from 1983 to 96. In stature, he was straight as an arrow, and in character, he was equally straight. Really a no-nonsense cop. And even though he came to it, the life of a patrolman, after he'd retired from Volvo, you would never know it from his manner. He acted like he'd been a cop all his life. And Archie lived the last few years of his life in a nursing home in Elizabeth City, so we didn't see much of him in these last few years. But he was a great asset to our town. We've also lost Don Pittard of Soundview Trail. Don is a rarity, I guess. I think he's a rarity in Southern Shores in that he's a native North Carolinian, Roanoke Rapids fellow. A great contributor to our town, a great contributor to his church, Duck Church, tireless worker in many volunteer activities. And this morning, we had a memorial service for Bruce Green. Bruce and Lois have lived on Crooked-Back Loop since the 90s. Bruce is an outstanding volunteer ever since he joined us in Southern Shores. He served the SSCA, served the CPOA. He's president of the CPOA for at least one term, I think maybe two, and served several years on our planning board, 2 or 3 of them as chair of the planning board. Those of you who know Bruce know that he was a true gentleman. He's a true man of God. He was a great patriot, and all who knew him or had contact with him will miss him. So now I would invite you all to join in a moment of silence in honor of our great volunteer Bruce Green and all the volunteers that have gone before us over the years to make this town the unique place it is. Let's have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Council, I propose that we amend the agenda to include an item under reports, item D. It's under staff reports, item D. Canal dredge update from our town manager and our town engineer. I hope that meets with your approval.
I move we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We have an agenda. Council, what's your pleasure with respect to the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're a town of volunteers. We've been known as a town of volunteers for a long time, and tonight we wish to recognize one of our great volunteers, Mr. Bill Gleason. Bill, would you join me? Somebody have a camera? We got to record this.
Got a couple of big cameras.
Bill Gleason has served the town very faithfully for a long time on the town planning board, and he also served the town very capably, very diligently during a sort of a difficult period when he advised the American National Officer and acting town manager and planner. And he's also served as a member of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee in the past. So we want to recognize Bill with this certificate of appreciation, and if you don't mind, I'll read it. I just put mine in my pocket.
Should I have glasses? I have glasses.
Bill Gleason presented July 2nd, 2013. The Southern Shore Town Council recognizes your service on the planning board in 2008 to 2013, as well as your service on the town capital improvement planning committee. Town council and citizens of the town express their gratitude for your dedicated service. The town will always be considered unique as long as volunteers desire to serve the town unselfishly to make it a better place to live. We wish you the very best for the future, and we thank you. And that is signed by town council. Thank you. My pleasure. I will add one other remark about my friend Bill. He is now serving as the president of the Community Care Company of CARE, one of the, in my opinion, premier charitable organizations in our county, in bringing health care to people who have absolutely no place else to go. And I congratulate you and thank you for that service, Bill. Turn to staff reports, and we're ready for our town planner, Mr. Wes Haskett.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief report for you tonight for the month of June. There were 6 zoning permits issued, 34 building permits issued, which consisted of 1 new single-family dwelling, 4 additions, 1 remodel, and 28 others. There were 108 building inspections conducted at 62 different job sites. There are currently 9 single-family dwellings and 1 bank under construction. The total amount of fees collected in June was $8,304.50. The total amount of fees collected for the fiscal year was $97,504.67. And it's interesting to note that these fees were up from last year, which was $78,416.29, and this is the highest number that we've had since the fiscal year 2007-2008. So the building inspection numbers or the building permit numbers are up as well. So we're picking up. Lastly, just want to touch on the bicycle and pedestrian planning grant. If you remember, we did apply, and I'm pleased to announce that we were awarded the $28,000 grant. This grant is to develop a joint bicycle and pedestrian plan for the town of Southern Shores. And we were one of, there were 12 applications, and 3 municipalities were selected for this joint plan. We are one of them. So we'll be working on that for the next year or so, and I'll be coming to you all with progress and updates. Any questions?
Will you be involving volunteers for the committee, or is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. There actually is a steering committee that will be involved that consists of citizens, council member, planning board members, whoever, and anyone can volunteer or if they'd wish to serve on the steering committee. And they actually help take data, collect data in the town, as well as provide input from a local level. There will be a consultant involved, a third party. So it will be between the consultant, the town, as well as the steering committee, which consists of citizens. So we'd be pleased, and we'll try to advertise that as good as we can, put it on the website, broadcast email, things of that nature when it gets to that point. So, good question. Any other questions?
I congratulate you and thank you on your grant writing skills.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good show.
Thank you.
Police Department, Chief Cole.
Very nice. I like that. Fancy. Nice job.
I spiced it up, but I didn't know I was going to have an audience to be the guinea
I don't
pigs.
have my glasses, but I don't know.
You're
that-
probably better off because I can't see it either. So, for the month of June, for the police department report, the total calls for service were 980. Some of the breakdowns of those calls for service, we had 269 business checks. Officers also conducted 135 residence checks. We responded to 5 mutual aid calls to surrounding police departments. We had 21 direct traffic. We had 21 suspicious condition calls. We also responded to 20 different alarms within the town. And officers conducted 141 traffic stops. And as you can see with the breakdown of the incidents and actual investigations, we had 34 in the month of June. And off to the right, you'll see some of the highlighted ones. For example, we had 5 B&Es breaking and entering. Those were all rental homes that were vacant, except for one that the folks decided to come down that weekend and scared the burglar away. We had 4 larcenies. We also had 5 vandalism reports, and we had 3 drug-related offenses. Officers made 5 arrests for the month of June. One of those included a drug violation. One of them was a driving while intoxicated. They issued 41 written citations. Some of the breakdowns you can see off to the right, but the biggest 2 are 9 seatbelt and 13 for speeding. They also issued another 63 warning citations. Again, speeding was the big one with 34. And those aren't all tourists either. A lot of those were locals. We had 83 ordinance violations. So our community resource officer is doing his job. He's doing very well. 68 of those were failure to display a permit, parking in a restricted area, and we've had 8 that were parking in the right-of-ways. And officers also investigated 7 motor vehicle accidents. Questions?
I see the suspicious conditions, 21. Does that replace the suspicious persons that we were used to seeing before?
Yeah, because they're not always persons. A lot of it is officer initiated. If they happen to see a person or they see something that just doesn't look right. A lot of it is when your rental agencies will call and they may find an open door or something to that effect, and that all falls under that category.
Thank you.
Good question. Yes, ma'am.
The beach, you didn't mention anything here. How's that going? Is it going pretty
It's still out there.
well? I know that.
It's actually going very well. Our community resource officer he's really done a good job of educating, and he's warning them. So when someone gets a ticket, I know for a fact they've been warned at least on 2 different occasions. We've had a couple of issues with dogs that he's taken care of. We've had he stopped a couple just the other day. They made it down to First Avenue and thought they were still in the town of Duck, which is about 12 streets off. But he's doing a good job out there.
Are most of the, you mentioned 68 ordinance violations, are most of those on the beach?
No, most of those are parking violations.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Have there been any difficulties with the equipment? Remember the tents, the tables?
Actually, no. We've been tagging it. He comes out on a Monday, and he's been tagging several different tents. And the next morning, they've been taken care of. So a lot of it he catches before we even have to tag them, and just reminds them that they need to remove it.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I see Chief Harvey, Fire Department. Good evening, sir.
I see the pressure's on me now to spiff up our reports. For the month of June, we had a total of 33 calls, of which only 3 were fire, 26 were rescue medical calls. One hazardous condition, 1 service call, and 2 good intents. And this compares to 43 total calls for the month of June in last year. Any questions?
I'd like to thank the department for moving us through the rear ender on Ocean Boulevard Sunday.
Oh, that was,
On the way
all you
home,
have,
sir.
Mr. Mayor, all you have to do is just wave to us and we'll get you right through.
I gave you a big smile.
You sure did, and so did your wife. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We turn to our town manager, who will get us into the canal dredging update.
Mr. Mayor, is that this, we need to proceed with that now? Is that, proceed with that, okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The town's consultant engineer is here, Mr. Anloff, and he'll be giving us a technical portion of this update, but I did want to bring this to you since we are in the new fiscal year, and the contract, of course, has been awarded and executed. And basically, I wanted to just go over a timeline with you for 1 minute before Mr. Anloff proceeds to remind us of where we are in this ongoing, the larger project. On July the 7th, 2009, the original Camel Major permit was issued to dredge the town's entire canal system. And subsequent to that, of course, approximately 2.5 miles were dredged as what we call Phase 1. On March 26th of 2012, the Camel Major permit was modified in anticipation of Phase 2 of the town's canal dredging project. And of course, recall that shifted from a different type of dredging into what we call mechanical dredging. So we're permitted now to mechanically dredge the remaining 5 miles of canals that remain undredged in the town. On August 21st of last year, 2012, the council held a meeting and invited public comment, which was received from numerous citizens. And by unanimous resolution, the council authorized staff to begin planning for the bidding and develop a financial plan to fund Phase 2 of the canal dredging project. It was August 21st of last summer. Since that time, there have been progress reports and updates made at each subsequent council meeting. And specifically on December 4th of 2012, the council adopted a resolution requesting funding assistance from the North Carolina Division of Water Resources for Phase 2 of the canal dredging project, and that was at the recommendation of the volunteer consultant, Mr. Tom Bennett. At that time, of course, we did not get that grant, but we did make application for it. In February 19th of this year, 2013, the council, in an open meeting in its retreat discussion, held a discussion with staff on its ongoing development of the dredging contract bid specifications. A month later, on March 19th, 2013, there was a public hearing held in this room on the proposed financing package as required by the Local Government Commission. At that same meeting, the Town Council adopted a resolution authorizing the application for a loan to be approved by the Local Government Commission to finance the Canal Phase 2 project. On March 28, 2013, the dredging contract bid opening occurred, the initial one, and recall that there were only 2 bidders at that time, and so we re-advertised that. On April 10th, 2013, was the final dredging contract bid opening. And on April 16th, 2013, in a meeting here, the Town Council awarded the dredging contract to Salmon's Dredging Incorporated of Virginia Beach, Virginia. And of course, that was contingent at the time on the Local Government Commission approving the ongoing financing package that had been submitted. On June the 4th, 2013, the Local Government Commission approved the town's request for financing with PNC Bank, approximately $1.5 million, to initiate this phase 2 of the dredging project. And on June 18, 2013, the council approved the financing for phase 2 canal dredging project and authorized the execution of loan documents, and those loan documents were executed. At that same meeting on June 18, 2013, the council approved the capital improvement plan for fiscal year 13-14 with a priority list. And Duckwoods Drive is approved as the first project on the reconstruction category of that list. And at that same meeting on June 18, 2013, council also authorized the execution of the dredging contract with Salmon's Dredging as the contractor for phase 2 of the canal dredging project. And on July the 1st, the first day of the fiscal year, that dredging contract was executed with Salmon's Dredging Incorporated. And so at this time, I'd like to ask the town engineer, Mr. Joe Anloff of Anloff Engineering, if he could update the council on where we are exactly with the specifics of the project.
Mr. Mayor, Town Council, I'd like to take this opportunity to give you an update on where we stand in the permitting process as it pertains to the second phase of dredging. In order to make the process more efficient, the contractor has selected a number of sites within town to act as temporary spoil transfer sites or an area to do land-based dredging in order to make the process, again, more efficient and more cost-effective. And so the contractor, Salmon's Dredging, has selected these sites based on logistics, on their proximity to the work. The contractor has made a selection based on logistics, on the location of these sites and proximity to the work. And the sites that he has chosen, he has negotiated with that property owner an agreement that authorizes the use of that property for a temporary spoil transfer site. The sites that he has chosen is 8 Juniper Trail, 108 Duckwoods Drive, and a location within the right-of-way of Tall Pine Lane. Those are all what I would categorize as spoil transfer sites. And one location at 170 Sassafras Lane, which is a location where there would actually be some land-based dredging of the canal identified in the permitting process as Inner Channel 6, which is a small spur canal that comes off Gingite Creek. It's tributary to Gingite Creek, and it comes up into towards Sassafras Lane. So again, we have 3 temporary spoil transfer sites and 1 site that I would classify as a land-based dredging site.
Where is it on Trinity Trail, Joe?
8 Juniper Trail. Which
8
is,
Juniper.
That's right. That's the location of Vincent Law Firm.
Yeah.
This morning, Tom Bennett and I met with George Wood of Environmental Professionals, and we handed over documentation that's required for a permit modification to modify the existing permit to make an allowance for these additional spoil transfer sites and/or land-based dredging sites. The CAMA permitting process requires that we notify the adjacent riparian property owners of the proposed activities, and that is done through certified mail return receipts. We send a letter indicating what it is that we propose. We attach a plat that depicts how the property is to be used, and that is sent to the adjacent riparian property owners, which would be the property owner that to each side that shares a common shoreline. And so each of those notifications were sent out, and we have received either the green card that indicates that they've received the package, or we've gotten a letter back that indicates whether they have no objection or an objection to the project as proposed. The majority of letters received are no objection to the work as proposed. Last evening, we met with Jim Solomons of Solomons Dredging for the purpose of having him sign and execute the contract documents, and we also discussed a number of project components with him, as some members in the community have voiced some concerns to us regarding the project. And so we discussed some of the very specific items, which include, for example, night dredging. That was a concern that was relayed, people concerned about dredging 24 hours a day. The contractor is committed to no night dredging. In other words, the operation would be from dawn till dusk with no dredging after the sun sets. One of the other concerns relayed were the amount of trucks, the style of trucks, the operation of trucks. The trucks that will be used on this project will be quad axle trucks. They will enter the spoil transfer site where an excavator will be set up next to the waterway. There's an excavator on a barge within the canal that does the dredging through the canal channel itself. He loads that spoil material onto a barge. The barge comes to the transfer site. An excavator at the transfer site transfers that material directly into a truck. That truck leaves the site and goes to the spoil disposal site, which is Soundside Recycling, located in Currituck County mainland. The quad axle trucks will be the mechanism from getting the material from that transfer site to the disposal site. The targeted dredge volume, spoil volume, a daily target that the contractor has established is somewhere between 350 to 450 cubic yards dredged per day. Each quad axle truck can hold 14 cubic yards. What that translates to within that 10-hour working day is approximately 30 to 32 trucks per day, which breaks down to about 3 trucks round trip per hour on the roadway. The contractor has also indicated that he will have flagmen out on the road to provide clear communication to residents driving on that road to the activities of the trucks. One of the other things that we wanted to be clear about is that there's no material, no dredge spoil material that is temporarily stockpiled or otherwise deposited on any of the temporary spoil transfer sites or the land-based dredging site. All the material is extracted from the barges and is placed directly onto a truck when that material is driven away. And so we sat down and discussed these elements of the project with him. The man and his company have an impeccable reputation, and I expect that the work will be done professionally. Are there any questions?
Joe, if you could comment on when the dredger proposed to use the Duckwood site in reference to the calendar?
It's of the transfer sites and land-based dredging, his intent is to start with Sassafras Lane, because he calculates that he can be in that site and out of that site within a few days' time. So they start at that location. Then they're going to work on everything that's tributary to Gingite Creek, which is transferred at Tall Pine Lane, and then continue to work inward as they're excavating the canal as they go, everything tributary to Gingite Creek, and then working their way under Tall Pine Bridge. They intend to use the Tall Pine transfer site for everything that's tributary to, which we classify as outside channels or inside channel work. And then the nomenclature on the map, we go to channels A, B, C, all the way through K. And the majority of the work in the vicinity of that Tall Pine transfer site, as a contractor deems efficient from his perspective, will be transferred from Tall Pine Lane. When he gets into the canals that are in the interior, And the main canal that runs north-south along and parallel to Duckwoods Drive is described as Canal CG. And the majority of that canal work will be transferred from that Duckwoods Drive, the temporary spoil transfer site. Then everything that's to the east of the Trinity Trail Culvert Bridge that's Canal CK. That's all transferred from 8 Juniper Trail. And as far as how and when he uses it, he approximates that he would be on that site between 50 and 60 days, mathematically, if he hits his target range of 350 to 450 cubic yards. And that's, that time frame, 50 to 60 days, is barring weather delays and things of that nature, mechanical delays. But that's the approximate time frame that he intends to be on that site. He is optimistic and hopes that he's finished with this project before Christmas. And the dredge period, the allowed dredge window is from October 1st to February 14th at midnight, effectively February 15th. And there would be some mobilization to these sites to get them prepared sometime in September. So we'd be looking at September through the end of December if he hits his target.
The two canals north reaching off of the canal that goes into Tall Pine, will that be transferred to Tall Pine?
It depends on the time. This particular site, 108 Duckwoods Drive, was chosen because it's centrally located. And everything that he has submitted in his bid has been based on the logistics of running multiple push barges back and forth through the canals at one time. So he's got to look at which barges are coming from which directions, how many teams and crews he has on the job site, and figure out which site. So in our meeting, when we discussed that, he was unwilling to commit to say that all the material would go to a certain site. And it's just going to be a function of what is most efficient when he gets his boots on the ground. The man is a very common sense man. It's his demeanor is stark. He's very straightforward.
Are we permitting the trucks to use the Tall Pine Bridge?
No, sir. Because there's a gross vehicle weight restriction of 17 tons on that bridge, and the town's in the process of having that bridge re-engineered, we have concerns about the load that we put on that bridge. So from Tall Pine and Sassafras, they turn north and go on South Dogwood Trail to East Dogwood to NC 12 to 158, and then up to the spoil disposal. And that's been clearly described. So every time that a truck has to go that route versus Duckwoods Drive to 158, that's another logistical issue where it causes delays to the amount of time required for that truck to drive through town. The specifications require that the trucks drive 5 miles an hour less than the posted speed limit. So, we're asking them to be extremely careful. All the truck drivers that will be on this project are direct employees of Salmon's Dredging. There will not be a subcontracted truck on this project.
And we will, of course, be deferring our rebuild of Duckwoods Drive till after completion of the project.
Yes, sir. There's a pothole repair, I believe it's at 44 Duckwoods Drive, that I think will be part of a repair project list to be done. Peter and I discussed this today about letting the majority of small repairs go out to be bid informally very soon. And I think that it behooves this project and the residents to have that particular pothole fixed, even if we have to go back and fix it again after this truck traffic uses the road.
Any questions, other questions, council?
I have a few questions. A spoil site, what is, besides a shovel and a person operating a shovel on that site, what is done I would assume that trucks pull into these, it's only 100 by 200 foot lot on Duckwoods Drive. What happens to the sand that eventually will accrue in those tire tracks of those trucks and ditch is dug in, and do they lay something down on that site or anything?
Each of the transfer sites, they'll place logging mats, which, if you're unfamiliar with a logging mat, they're big, rough-hewn planks of wood that are tied together usually with heavy gauge wire, and they have spaces in between. So effectively, they act as a tire rack, which you might see as a soil erosion sedimentation control measure used on construction sites, where you have a ribbed section that knocks the material that might accrue in a tire off before it goes onto the street. We do have some expectations that the contractor will keep that roadway clean if it requires him to broom or sweep it after every working day to make sure the site is clean. But the sites are generally going to be prepared with logging mats so that there's no rutting or grooving of the soil, and the trucks will travel on those logging mats, and the excavator itself will be perched on logging mats in the location closest to the water.
Is there, what happens if some spoils fall on the ground?
They'll be cleaned up immediately.
They're not allowed to drop any spoils into the water either, I would assume, and then they're transferring
No,
them?
no, everything will be maintained and cleaned up. We also have silt fence proposed along, running east and west on each side of the logging mats to retain any material that might come off the tires from meandering or going beyond the work area, the area of disturbance.
Tell me about the truck. This is a sealed unit. Is it top sealed? Can it slosh stuff out? I mean, or is it contained at all in the vehicle?
I haven't seen his trucks, so I can tell you they're quad axle trucks, about 14 cubic yards. It's got 2 axles on the ground, 2 drop axles. He says you'll see very little loss of material. As far as whether they have a canopy cover that rolls out, I haven't seen his equipment. He hauls grain. He buys and sells grain. Is his primary business. And
Does he clean the truck out before he does the grain?
I hope so.
I mean, I have other questions, but they're really not questions of a dredging nature. So he's now has one truck. He has one dredge.
He has multiple dredge equipment. He has a slew of equipment, barges, excavators. We asked him about the size of equipment he might bring down here. He hasn't committed to bringing in just one crew. He may bring more than one crew. He anticipates at this time 6 trucks.
And one dredge.
And 1 excavator on a barge, and then multiple push barges. In other words, some people have discussed anywhere between 3 and 5 push barges. So they get the material that's transferred. Once they excavate the material from the canal, that is then placed on a push barge, which is self-propelled and very quiet. So they're going up and down the canal, moving that material that's been excavated from the canal bottom to that transfer site.
And we're still talking 30 feet wide and down to 5 feet?
It varies because of the flushing models that the state required us to examine. It's stepped. The further you go back into the canal, for example, everything to the east of the Trinity Trail, Juniper Trail, Culver Bridge is a 4-foot excavation depth and a 30-foot width. The main canal that comes to the west of that Culver Bridge and then goes north and south parallel to Duckwoods Drive, and then the canal as you make the turn to come out towards Tall Pine Lane, that canal is all 5 feet. The majority of what we call Canal C and CE and CF, which go up towards Beech Tree and Holly Trail, those all are about 5 feet, halfway the distance from where they tie into that main canal to their distal ends. And then we step it up to 4 feet. The thought being that when we have a strong wind tide and water exits the canal, that it steps down so those distal ends don't trap water. So you get a flushing, which we've seen in the last decade. We've seen a few events that have evacuated the canals entirely of water.
One last question for now. Was there any discussion whatsoever regarding if some site is not acceptable to the town? That was ever discussed? And what he
The
could or
contractor
could
has
not do?
chosen these sites based on logistics. These are the sites that he prefers to use. I think that it would be an increase in cost if we use another site. It would result in a change order to use a different site.
So what we're saying here is the fact that before he bid, he came down, he looked.
Secured,
He went
yes.
for his contracts to see if he could get anybody that would let him access the canals before he put a bid price in. It's all based upon that. And so when we executed he put his bid in, he got the bid, and so that he knows now what he needs to pay out for the situation.
I'm not privy to what, all the conversations, but yes, during the bid period, he contacted people that he knows. He knows quite a few people around here. And he contacted people and made arrangements to use their sites, even secured written agreements, and then he prepared his bid, understanding that he was going to be able to get those sites. And there's nothing that would, there's nothing that would lead him to believe that, that anything other than that would be the final outcome.
Is CAMA interested? I told you one more question.
Well,
Is-
we did have George and I went to Elizabeth City, met with Ron Rinaldi to have a scoping meeting where we laid out these spoil transfer sites. After we met with Jim Solomons, after he provided us the bid, we met with him, he disclosed that these are the sites he wanted. Within a week, we were in Elizabeth City with Ron Rinaldi, showed him the spoil transfer sites. We showed him the change in disposal, because the disposal, instead of going to Soundside Recycling, was originally going to go to Green Acres Sand Pit. We also described some additional maintenance work on the outside channel where there's been some shoaling right near the west side of the North Marina. And so we discussed it, we laid it all out, and he saw nothing that would prohibit the issuance of a modification. There was nothing that was a, quote-unquote, red flag that would cause him concerns from a permitting perspective. And so we moved forward with notification at that time, as required by the process, to notify the adjacent riparian property owners. That's typically a 30-day process by which you notify them, they receive a certified mail package and sign that they've received it, and then they have 30 days to respond, indicating that they object to the project or that they have no objection to the project. Again, we've received letters. There's 8 parties that we've notified. I've received 6 letters back. 5 were no objection. The 6th was an objection, and the other 2 have not yet responded. One is Town Bank, which, being a bank, may not be compelled to respond. It goes to the accounting department, so I don't know.
Are there specific grounds upon which you can object to that are the avenue, or can you object upon anything that you like?
I honestly am not entirely familiar with the process. The letter, George Wood is much more able to answer that process for Division of Coastal Management. That's his area of expertise. Again, this morning we met, I handled the notifications to send them out, primarily because I prepared the plat work, which depicted how the sites were to be used. So there was some coordination with each of the site owners to make sure that they agreed that what was depicted in the plat was consistent with their letter of authorization or their lease agreement. And so there was coordination on my part with those property owners to make sure that it was depicted accurately. And then I sent out the adjacent riparian property owner notification, and then those materials were given to George this morning. We anticipate submitting the modification within the next few working days to the Division of Coastal Management. And so George can answer those questions where I would fail to do it well.
Thank you.
Will the canal system be closed during the dredging?
We are required to install turbidity curtains at the points where the canal would connect to Gingite Creek, the receiving stream, because that's a primary nurse area and water quality is of concern. So for the most part, they will be closed. There's really no intent to keep them open. It would be difficult to open the turbidity curtain while there's active dredging going on, and the turbidity on the inside of the turbidity curtain could be considerably higher than the turbidity outside. The turbidity would be the small particulate matter that's in the water column, suspended material.
As I understand it, you have substantially engineered the rebuild of Douglas Drive?
Yes, sir. We have re-engineered the surface of the roadway. As you're aware, that right-of-way reduces from 60 feet to 30 feet, which complicates the necessary improvements that I think we need to implement as it pertains to drainage. That area is poorly drained. This averages somewhere between 3 and 4 feet above sea level. And the canal is anywhere from 0 feet to 1.5 feet, depending on our wind tide. So we don't have a lot of positive relief there. And we are currently seeking an easement for drainage purposes to connect the right-of-way to the canal so that we can implement some drainage feature like we did on Chickahaw Trail to get some positive drainage in that area. And we've been unsuccessful in making contact with any party regarding a drainage easement. But the majority of the engineering work is finished with the exception of that drainage work, which ultimately the life expectancy of the road would be increased with the drainage improvement. The majority of the failures of that road are failures of the subgrade, and when the subgrade gets inundated with water, it can sometimes become more liquid in nature.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if I could comment 1 second on two items that Joe touched on. One is the spillage aspect. I just wanted to assure council that the contract itself has numerous specifications dealing with spillage. The contractor is bound by those. He's bound to clean up any spillage that occurs on the state roads and on town streets. And when Joe and I interviewed him last night again about his trucks, he made the comment that we won't see any material spillage at all, that it will be just water, if anything, coming that would slosh from a truck. The traffic, he is also bound by contract, many specifications in the contract that require him to use safety precautions to abide by DOT standards, and has a flag man there. When we interviewed him specifically about the rotation of the trucks, he said ideally 3 an hour and spaced out. In perfect conditions, hopefully there would be one every 20 minutes when he's on the roll. I was concerned that there would be trucks lined up on the street. That would not be the case under ideal conditions, that they would roll in and out. The noise factor, he described the barges are self-propelled, extremely quiet. The excavator, of course, would have a noise, and the trucks, individual trucks, would have a noise. So that would be the noise factor. And y'all have already commented on the street repair that's proposed for that. And we've assured, any residents we've talked to, we've assured them of the plan that you have adopted, that Duckwoods Drive is next up, so to speak. So I just want to elaborate on those points as well. And one last point, if I may, on the calendar, in interviewing him again, Joe had described to you what he said about his plan for hitting the northern areas first, and it was my impression that he anticipated coming to this site for activation around the 1st of November. After he finished with the other sites, he would come down to this site and be finished by middle of December.
Any other questions?
Have none.
No? You have it, sir. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now I hear from the Southern Shores Civic Association. There's Ross. Good evening, Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'd like to invite everyone to the SSCA General Membership Meeting on Monday, July the 8th at 7 p.m. here in the Pitt Center. Our guest speaker will be Lieutenant Kevin Dupree. He's from the Dare County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant Dupree will review current drug trends in Dare County, law enforcement efforts across the community, and youth outreach and education programs provided by the Sheriff's Department. Lieutenant Dupree will also provide information pertaining to synthetic substances in our area, including K2, spice, and bath salts. The SSCA has granted the Network of Endangered Sea Turtles, better known as NEST, permission to place small posters at 3 major crossovers in effect to educate our guests as well as our residents about the nesting activities here in Southern Shores. The posters will be placed at Chickahawk crossover, East Dogwood, and Hillcrest, and any crossovers where there's existing nest until they've hatched. That's all I have to report. Are there any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have tonight Mr. Leo Holland with us for the Chickahoe Property Owners Association.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Council, and happy belated 4th of July here, or early 4th of July. We do now have if you have noticed at the park, we've got Bruce Carmen's bicycle rack there, and it's being used. The family this week will be putting a plaque on it in memory of Bruce, and I know Sue is glad that it's being used and that it's in place. So that's behind us. I encountered some individuals, I didn't see them, but I got the remnants this past week where they dumped 2 truckloads of tree clippings in the Chickahock property lot. And Saturday morning, I moved those out, which by the time I was finished, if I could have found them, I probably would have strung them up. But thank God I got the stuff moved across the street, and thanks to the town chipping program, that material got removed today. Did you have a question? Or
Where was it dumped?
it was dumped in the Chickahock property lot, parking lot. As you go back, the first load was dumped on the left, and then the final one was, where the parking lot is in the back, those spots in the back, that was where the other load was. So I had about 2.5 hours of work, and needless to say, by the time I was done, I was a little warm.
That's a well-hidden area back there.
Yeah, it is. And so we had that little scrap there. We will be monitoring that parking lot Thursday, the 4th of July, to make sure everybody that's using it has their parking passes. In addition, we're also encountered 57 residents that haven't paid their property assessment dues. And in our world, that's $5,700. And we have sent the second invoice out to those individuals. Hopefully, they will respond. Those that don't respond, we're going to be moving from the selling phase to the telling phase of the collection process. So if you hear anything about it, it's because we've had to get a little tough and get our attorney involved.
Isn't that a rather unusual number for this time?
No, and some of them are, that you look at, are continuous offenders. And we had one particular individual, it took us a while, but we finally were able to collect from him. That was 4 years worth of assessments that we finally got. The other thing is our monthly meeting is normally scheduled for this Thursday night. Because of the 4th of July, we've moved it to the 11th, next week from this Thursday. And let's see, I guess that's all I've got at this point in time. Has anybody got any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Mr. Sam Williams, Planning Board. I call your attention, Council, to tabs 2 and 3.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm going to be reporting on 2 Planning Board actions on 2 zoning text amendments. ZTA 1303, it's a zoning text amendment for some changes to the zoning ordinance related to the wireless facility. The first thing that I wanted to report on was that in the zoning text amendment that was presented to the Planning Board, they're proposing a addition to allow walls and not just chain link fences. The current language just permits chain link fences around the facility. The Planning Board recommends that proposed change. It also, they are proposing a height limit of 14 feet of any wall or chain link fence around the facility. And the current language permits only fencing 6 to 10 feet in height. And the Planning Board does not recommend changing the upper limit from 10 to 14 feet. The third change that was proposed is that in the signage language for the wireless facility, it doesn't include any exception for legal notices, identifications, directional informational signs required by government bodies, public utilities, or civic associations, those signs are excluded from regulation or may be excluded from the regulation with the approval of the town council. And the ZTA proposes adding this language to the wireless facility language, and that would make it consistent with the exclusion section in our signage zoning. So the planning board recommended that change, and we found that the ZTA to be consistent with the current land use plan. So the bottom line is the planning board recommends approval of ZTA 1303 as amended by the planning board. The second ZTA.
Can we deal with these one at a time, Council?
Yes.
Would you like to?
Yes.
Can we deal with them one at a time? Yes. Okay.
Any questions?
Council? Chairman of the planning board is at your disposal. The question?
I didn't know anything.
Anybody have a question at all on this call for a public hearing?
Yes, it requires a public hearing.
Let's set a public hearing for the first meeting, and is there urgency?
As far as urgency goes, I'm not aware of any urgency, but because SSCA is in negotiations with AT&T for that site, for building a cell tower on that site, there's probably some need for some urgency on SSCA's part. Ross, did you want to comment on that?
To get the tower built in a reasonable length of time, we need to get the planning board to present it plus has to get permits. So doing the permitting process needs to start either this month or no later than next month.
I'll set the public hearing for our next meeting Monday, 16th of July. Yes?
I do have one question.
Yes.
Good.
The sign that they're proposing or showing in their drawing, will that be presented separately to be reviewed? Or, I mean, basically what this is asking for us to do is to amend the words of the zoning.
Yes.
Like the specific sign itself.
Right. This is a request to amend the zoning text.
Okay.
And any permit application, they would propose a certain sign, and the planning board, in reviewing that application, would make a recommendation on that sign.
But, excuse me a second, we are talking about two different parts of the ordinance regarding signs. One will be, it's my understanding that one will be a sign that is the Welcome to Southern Shores, the logos type sign on a wall that they have proposed. And the other is a sort of a legal sign that says, in case of emergency, contact so-and-so, which is a small placard they would put someplace to meet state legal requirements.
Right. The sign with any Welcome to Southern Shores or a picture of Donald Duck or whatever they decide to come forward with is the sign that Jody was asking about, and is not to be confused with the exclusion language for identification signs, directional informational signs erected or required by government bodies, public utilities, or civic associations. They are excluded from the regulation with the approval of town council. So if there is something that they wanted to put up there that didn't meet our sign ordinance, council could grant that waiver.
The reason I was raising the question is I'd like to see some discussion because I have some problems with being 2 miles into town and we're saying, welcome to Southern Shores. So that's why I'd like to get ready to that. You don't have to worry about responding now, but when you get ready for that, just wanted to make sure we weren't improving that.
You're in Southern Shores, I bet. You're in Southern Shores.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, those sorts of discussions would take place during the permit application discussions.
Thank you.
I just have one little tiny thing. I told Wes this. I took out my hand lens to try to read the plans that they sent us, and the lighting says 1,500 watts, which is only allowed 500, so that might be something that'll have to come down and decide it.
That'll be discussed during the permit application. Are there any questions?
Are we finished with this one, Councilman? Yes. Then we'll have a public hearing on the 16th of July. Turn attention to tab 3. Sam?
The second zoning text amendment application for an animal boarding facility. And this is to modify the ordinance to permit animal boarding facilities in the commercial zoning district. And the proposed changes to the existing ordinance is to add to the definition section the definition of an animal boarding facility, to add a parking requirement for such as facility, and to add animal boarding facility as a conditional use under the commercial zoning district. And the proposed language for the last item, as a conditional use, was modified from the proposal to add language to make it consistent with the language we have for veterinary clinics. And that language is provided that all boarding and kennels are in an enclosed, heated, and air-conditioned building. As far as discussion, there was substantial discussion about noise, barking dogs, even in an enclosed facility. And Planning Board did not take any action in the zoning text for that noise ordinance, but I'm sure that is one of the issues that will come up during the permit application. The Planning Board found it to be consistent with the land use plan, and Planning Board recommends approval of ZTA 13-04 as amended by the Planning Board. Are there any questions?
The verbiage in here, the language, does not exclude an outside area for use.
In the animal boarding facility as conditional use, the kennels and the runs for the boarding have to be inside a building. That does not exclude an outdoor run when they are cleaning the kennels and things like that.
So it will be an opportunity for them to take the dogs or other animals out.
Yes, while they're cleaning runs.
Okay, I guess really the use of the term run in an air-conditioned place was what I was concerned about. I think of a run as being something that is outside.
The term run is often used for just an enclosure within a kennel.
Okay.
If you have a boarding facility that has 50 runs, they've got the capability of boarding at least 50 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
In boarding situations, as you're probably aware, sometimes they will, a family will put 2 of their dogs in one run. But they're not confined to crates where cats are normally confined to crates.
Thank you.
Is this limited to dogs and cats?
It just says, kennels and runs, but it is not necessarily limited to dogs and cats.
And this is a seasonal facility,
Uh,
as indicated in the material provided by the applicant.
I think they did mention that it would be seasonal, but that was not part of this discussion. We were talking about modifying the zoning text.
Mm-hmm.
That would would be when they actually submit the request, we get into those details.
Right, right.
Which, it isn't mentioned in here what building you're considering in Southern Shores Crossing.
They are considering the building that's on the end where Meridian 42 used to be, where the restaurant used to be. That's my understanding.
That's it, because that was part of my question. The last time we went through this, we discussed the event center.
We did.
I'm sorry?
The opposite,
The opposite end from Meridian, okay.
when you say the opposite end, you did not mean all the way around where Coastal Provisions is, but, okay, the farthest west, in the corner.
Understand? Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? And yes, public hearing does have to be scheduled.
Yep. Let's have a public hearing on this on the 16th also. Okay?
Okay.
No problem. I'll set July 16th for a public hearing on it. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to the planning board for their good work. Public comment, do we have people that wish to speak? I'll figure that out. I would remind the speakers that public comment is for the speaker to address the council. And under our rules of procedure, each speaker is permitted 3 minutes. The first speaker on the list is Rupert Wilson of 112 Duckwoods Drive.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I'm here in regards to the transfer of spoil site located at 108 Duckwoods Drive. And this site came to my attention on the 21st of June. The following Tuesday, I contacted Peter Rasco and requested a meeting so I would be able to obtain additional information in regards to the specifics of the transfer of spoil site. That meeting was set up for the following Friday, June 28th at 10 a.m. My wife and I met with Peter Rasco, Tom Bennett, and Joe Anloff with Anloff Engineering. I qualified that I was there as a concerned citizen, and the first thing is that I had talked to no one that was in disapproval or wanted to do anything to not get the canals dredged. But at the same time, we had safety concerns in regards to those people that are residing on Duckwoods Drive. So we proceeded to transfer information back and forth. And at the conclusion of that meeting, I conveyed that the intent of having the meeting was to request an alternative site. Because of the safety concerns, the amount of traffic on Duckwoods Drive, from the beginning of Duckwoods Drive to 108, it's approximately about a 2-mile round trip. We're talking about 30, 35 trucks per day. The present condition of Duckwoods Drive is deplorable, and I understand it is on the list to be repaired, but in reality, we don't have a date. So it would be further damage and inconvenience to the residents of Duckwoods Drive. At that time, I offered as a alternate site, the land that is located at the south end of Duckwoods Drive, and that could be necessitated as the spoil transfer site. And if we could utilize that site, it would totally take care of the 2-mile round trip dump trucks coming up and down Duckwoods Drive. And we wouldn't have the safety concerns for the residents, the children. There's a lot of children on that street that actually ride their bicycles to school. It's right around the corner from Kitty Hawk Elementary, ride their bikes home. Unfortunately, it wasn't received very constructively in regards because of the timing. Also, I conveyed to Peter that I was a little disturbed as a Southern Shores resident, the lack of information that here we are at this point in time in the
Mr.
time
Wilson,
frame of the project.
That's 3 minutes.
Is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll give you 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay.
30 seconds.
The lack of information, because we understand in regards to the CAMA qualifications from the permit that people on only both sides of the property had to be notified, but in reality, with the 2-mile round trip of the trucks going up and down Duckwoods Drive, it was impacting the entire street. And, you know, with all the venues we have of information today, I was baffled as to why that wasn't done. Further, after the meeting Friday, I have been able to obtain information that property at the south end is owned by the Civic Association. That property, if the town would pursue that, the permit and the usage of that by the Civic Association would only have to be done by the board. It doesn't have to go to a general membership vote, so it could be done very expeditiously, and it would eliminate our concerns in regards to the safety.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
The next name, I can't read it. It's Donald at 114 Duckwoods. Would you pronounce your last name for me, sir? What is it?
Mr. Mayor and Council, here to voice my concern over what appears to be the council's support of the use of residential property for non-residential purposes at 108 Duckwoods Drive. I'm concerned in the support of the contractor who apparently has decided to use or pick a site on the street. I don't know what you would term the transfer of the spoils to be, but I think we could all agree that it's certainly not residential in its use. And I'm concerned that we seem to be ignoring the purpose of the property for the purpose of the dredging.
Thank you, sir. Susan Gilliam, 56 Duckwoods.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. I'd just like to reiterate my concern also for the transfer site. And I think that we have a viable solution of changing it to another site that Mr. Wilson proposed to you, and I support that. And I also do have concerns about having it at 108, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. John Gaw, 146.
Mr. Mayor and Town Council, my name is John Gaw. I live at 146 Duckwoods Drive. My property is on the canal, and I have a boat. I am in favor of dredging the canal. That is not why I'm here. What I'm here about is my concern that the town is proceeding with this project and ignoring two major issues that mean a lot to me, and I think to other residents on Duckwoods Drive. I have lived on the Outer Banks for more than 40 years, much of that time in Southern Shores. I've lived on East Dogwood Trail, I've lived on Duckwoods Drive, and I've lived on Juniper Trail. One of the things that always impressed me about this town was that when it began, many of its ordinances were drafted based on a policy of reinforcing and where the town could, upholding the restrictive covenants that applied to the residential properties in this community. That was one of the driving forces. I know the town is not in the business of enforcing residential covenants, and I'm not about to suggest that you do that. I know you don't and you cannot do that. However, there are some things I want to point out in the covenants that the town has tried to uphold in its ordinances, and now I feel like there's a deviation from that. In Section 19 of the restrictive covenants that apply to the lot that you are going to use if this project goes forward, it says that no activity shall be conducted on the site, no obnoxious odors, noises, or the activity should not create conditions that will or may disturb the serenity, safety, or comfort of the occupants of surrounding properties. No obnoxious or offensive activity shall be carried on upon any lot, nor shall anything be done thereon tending to create a nuisance in the neighborhood. In paragraph or section 2 of the same covenants, it says that no obnoxious or offensive activity shall be carried on upon the property, nor shall anything be done which may be or may become a nuisance or annoyance to residents within the property. And then the first section says that the property shall be used for residential purposes. I submit, as someone else has, that this use is not a residential use. We can argue all night about it, whether it's an institutional use or other types of uses. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. What it is not, though, is a residential use. Moving on from that concern, which is a historical policy of the town, that at least other boards have followed. I presume this board may, I don't know that, but other boards have that I've appeared before. Then your own zoning ordinance limits the use of this property in this area to residential uses. I submit again that this activity is not a residential use, and for this project to go
Mr. Gall,
forward
that's 3 minutes.
is a violation of your own zoning ordinance. So I ask you please to consider these issues as you consider this activity on the lot in question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gall. Thank each of you for coming to share with us your views on this matter. Council and staff will take them into consideration, of course, as we try to move this dredging project forward. Council, we have no old business. We have a pleasant item of new business. Tab 4, we have 2 vacancies, and we have 2 nominees that have been interviewed by the town manager, and he is satisfied that each of them bring some unique talents and experience to the matter, to the process, the planning process. They are Elizabeth Betty Corbin, who is on Eagle's Nest, and David Neal, who lives on Wild Swan. What is your pleasure? We have 2 vacancies on the planning board. Since we have moved the 2, these are nominations as alternates to the planning board, since we moved the 2 prior alternates up, Elizabeth Morey and Gray Berryman. What's your pleasure, council?
Do we need to designate which is the first alternate and which is the second alternate?
Do we need to do that?
I think it's by approval, right?
Mm-hmm. Do anybody want to make a move? Shall we do it alphabetically? Corbin and Neal?
What about date of application?
Or the date of application? And what is the date of application?
That's June 21st.
6/13 and
Elizabeth.
no, it's
And May 21st.
alphabetical. Would someone like to move? Do we do this?
Sure. We approve the applicants as presented, Elizabeth Corbin and David Neal, as alternates to the planning board.
As alternates 1 and 2 respectively? As alternates 1 and 2 respectively? I'll sign it.
I'll second.
Oh, we got a second. Okay. Do we need a discussion, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I have a brief report tonight. As we get closer to the 4th of July, the project at Honeysuckle is very much nearing completion. That street project, and invite you to go take a look-see at that. I did want to reiterate what the chief said about the beach work that the community resource officer is doing. I would say we're having a fantastic summer, and so far we have very minimal worries as compared to years past in implementing new programs. It is going very smoothly. The relationship between the CRO and the lifeguards in Town Hall is working this year, I think, and the police department like clockwork. So we are proceeding with that. As Joe brought up, we are proceeding with developing specifications for the two categories on the capital improvement plan that you adopted. So we're not resting after the first, and we're continuing on with the budget that you adopted for this year, specifically that CIP, most important. We're also continuing with the planning for work on the addition to the police department. The chief and I have discussed, and the architect is busy in developing a bid packet for that to go out to receive proposals for a builder. Also, another component of the budget that the council adopted, the new position for Public Works, we're developing a job description, and hopefully in the next 10 days we'll actually be able to post that on the various mediums that we posted it on. And finally, I just wanted, on a good note, to remind council that each year a charity group has a surfing tournament in September here in Southern Shores, and this year the 5th annual Southern Shores Charity Surfing Tournament will be held. I believe it's going to be on September 7th this year. And recall last year we had over 300 spectators. This year promises to be an even bigger event if the weather holds, and we're promised some participants from out of the country. So it should be a good event. And I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you, sir. Town Attorney?
I don't have anything to report, Mr. Mayor, but I do wish you all a happy 4th of July week.
Thank you, sir. And a happy 4th to you. You'll be on your surfboat taking pictures?
I'll probably be at the office.
Oh. I want to remind everybody that this being an odd year, 2013, we'll be having a municipal election in November. There are 2 seats on council will be open. My term expires this year, as is Councilman Kowalski. I will not be running for re-election. And there's no chance that Billy will change her mind. I really hope that we have enough people interested in the government, in participating at the government at this level, that we can have some competition for these 2 seats this year. The filing period for office, it opens on Friday, July the 5th. It only runs for 2 weeks, less 6 hours. It closes Friday, July the 19th at noon. So I would encourage any of you who are interested in serving at this level to give us some thought. Let's have some competition. That's all I have. Jody?
I just want to mention one thing since it's the 4th of July. In today's paper, the Coastal Times, they were quoting the North Carolina law on what's permitted and not permitted. And there's a whole list that came along of fireworks that you can use and you can't use. It's mostly the ones you can't use. But I like the sentence that they said to describe it basically and simply, that if it leaves the ground or makes a sound, it's not legal. And I thought I could remember that than remember another the other one. So I'll just mention that to you.
Thank you, Jody. George?
I have a few things. As you know, most of you in the audience do know that I live on Duckwood Drive, and so I get a chance to drive them down the street repeatedly. And I'll have some questions for staff, which I will write and send them out tomorrow, but I thought I would just relate them right now. And they're questions basically on a topic that I always like to deal with, is like what happens down the line. And they're basically something like this. It says if the town asks the dredging company to come up with another transfer site and they either refuse or say that there are no other suitable sites, and they cannot and won't comply, what happens to the dredging contract, if anything, is one question I'll pose. The second question is, the dredging company have to comply with the town's request? Third question is, if the dredging company agrees that to move its site, can it increase the price of the dredging contract? And can it ask to be compensated for additional costs? Number 4, if the town insists on changing the transfer site, can the dredging company cancel the contract? And if they do, and the dredging is not done, what happens to the loan? And number 5, what happens if the dredging company can find another transfer site and it's not the SSCA property? Let's say it's on Potoskete, and the following month a group of people come from Potoskete and say, you know what, we don't want that over here. What do we do at that point? And how many times do we keep trying to change things as people don't want to have dredging, transfer sites on this street? Question, how long can that go on? And if this group of people who are sitting in front of me, my neighbors, decide that what we do is not something that they want to deal with, and they decide to pursue it in the court system to try to stop this from happening, then my next series of questions says, will the dredging occur this year? Is the contract extendable? Do we have to go through the same dredge bidding system again? Do we owe this dredger any money because we can't fulfill the contract because we are in litigation? And the next question is, what happens to the loan? And what goes there? So I'll put these together tomorrow and I will ship them out. And just as an exercise in wondering what if happens when these things occur, or if they do occur. And that's all I got.
David?
As the council's representative on the GovEd channel, I just wanted to point out that there's some new programming available on the government channel, which is called Destination Dare, which is a it's a 25 to 30 minute program with features from each of the towns and county government that I found extremely interesting. It's well made, very professional looking. And also, if you don't have cable like myself, I use DirecTV, soon we'll be able to announce how you can access this programming online over the internet. And as a reminder for the audience that if they want to go back and look at other past council meetings, our council meetings are recorded and they can be found on YouTube. I believe if you do a search on Town of Southern Shores and YouTube, you can go back and look at how some of these things transpired at some of these meetings and what the prior discussions were. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned.